Well, hello and welcome to another episode of More Perfect Marketing. David Bear here. Today we're going to be talking about the word that came to mind as soon as I saw the topic was gatekeepers of advertising. And I think back to when I started advertising in the 1990s, and there were gatekeepers, but very, very different ones. So typically, if you were going out and buying ads, maybe on the radio or in the newspaper, or you were doing something via mail, you had somebody who was selling you the service, and maybe they had some feedback or some rules or restrictions about what could show up in the newspaper, for example. But we had a lot more freedom and flexibility in the way that we advertised back then. Fast forward to today, where so much of the advertising happens in the digital environment, and there are regulators of, the properties where we run those ads. And there's a lot of careful hoops to jump through in order to make sure that you can keep advertising. And I'll just share a little anecdote before we dive into this conversation. I am no longer personally allowed to advertise, at least not currently, on Meta platforms. That's Facebook, Instagram, etc. And one of my accounts on Google got shut down as well. Thankfully, we have somebody who actually knows how to navigate this stuff, knows a lot more about these rules and regulations than I do. And so let's welcome John Horn to the conversation. Hey, John.
David, thank you so much for having me.
Indeed. So I kind of, outlined a little bit of what I hope that we're going to cover today. The idea of these gatekeepers um, having such an impact on how, where, what kinds of ads and what kinds of businesses can even advertise on certain platforms. It's a big deal. And I wonder if maybe you could give us a little bit of introduction to the work that you are doing. And I'd kind of like to kind of understand how you arrived at becoming a specialist in this area in the first place.
Absolutely. Gatekeeper is a fantastic way to describe it. I actually may steal that word to use in some of our communications because you're right. That's exactly what Google, Meta, the two big gatekeepers, and other platforms as well are right now. And the reality with where the internet is at the moment is that there are really only a couple of places the vast majority of people go to get information at scale. They search Google for things, they are scrolling through Facebook, Instagram, etc. And so if you're not allowed to be on those platforms, that can be incredibly detrimental, disastrous to your business. And I've seen businesses go out of business after being suspended by the platforms. So that's really part of how we came to specialize in this compliance space and helping people with Google Ads policies. So Step Group, we're an agency, digital advertising agency. We've been, doing Google Ads and other platforms for clients for over a decade. And, way back in the day, these compliance issues have always been here. And way back in the day, we had clients who were dealing with suspensions and trying to figure out Google's policies. And a lot of agencies kind of took the approach of, hey, if this happens, we don't really know what to do, and we don't want to deal with the headache of this and just kind of, go somewhere else and figure it out. And we said, hey, this is an opportunity. It is a headache. It is a nightmare. It's a lot of work and frustration, but let's figure out what actually is going on and see if we can help businesses fix their problems and get back online with Google. And so, started a journey which we've been on since then, building up just experience, team members who know what they're doing, pattern recognition of, okay, when you see the same problem 100 times, that's probably going to be the problem the 101st time. So let's fix that. And just being able to bring things from a volume perspective that no individual advertiser can, because they have their one issue that they're trying to deal with, and there's no way they can deal with it 100 times like an agency can and say, all right, this is what the problem is, let's fix it. And so over time we've kind of gotten to this place where we have a whole team that is dedicated here at Step Group to helping businesses with compliance issues, if their accounts are suspended, if their ads are disapproved, figuring out what went wrong and fixing them, as long as they do comply with Google's policies. Because this is really the big thing, is Google has these policies for a reason. They're trying to prevent bad actors from using their platform. And I love that. I want more of that. I don't want to be concerned when I go and search for something on Google and click on an ad that I'm going to have malware, or I buy a product and I'm never going to receive that product and it's just a scam taking my money. Like, I don't want that as a consumer. I certainly don't want to work with advertisers who do that. And it's awesome that Google is and Meta are shutting that down.
Mhm.
But as it sounds like you've experienced, personally, there are a lot of legitimate advertisers that get caught up in that. They're not trying to do anything nefarious, and yet for whatever reason they've triggered something algorithmically, or something looks suspicious or off, and so Google or Meta says, nope, you're guilty, and you're guilty until proven innocent in the law of
Yeah.
Google, or in the court of Google, is what I like to say.
Well, that was kind of presumptuous of you because I was trying to scam people with all my. No, I'm kidding. I'm
Well,
kidding. Yeah. I mean, this is, I think, a useful point is that there are a lot of businesses that are doing things legitimately, but whether they get swept up or caught up in some process, and often getting to appeal that, or working through the response process of saying, "Hey, I didn't mean to do it, mea culpa," is not very easy with these platforms. Now, we're not a traditional agency, but we do run ads for some of our consulting clients from time to time, and sometimes they'll come to us with some emergent request. Hey, my account got banned. This is not an area of specialty for us. How I guess how maybe you can describe what I've experienced in terms of the red tape and layers, and I don't know how many strikes and you're out, but it feels like very few strikes and you're out. What is that sort of structure in these companies like?
yeah, let me walk the listeners, walk the viewers through this, especially because this it's kind of mind-boggling to a lot of people until they experience it. Because you kind of assume, okay, I'm paying this company money, Google, Meta, whatever. We have a relationship. Oftentimes, this is a years-long relationship. We've got clients who've spent millions of dollars over the years with Google, and they're like, okay, if Google thinks something's gonna something's wrong, they're gonna tell me, right? They're gonna be like, hey, fix this. You've got a warning, whatever. And the reality is that's almost never how it works. So generally, what happens is you wake up one morning and you have an email from Google saying your account is suspended for X, Y, and Z policy. The most common policies are suspicious payment activity, circumventing systems, and unacceptable business practices. And they'll link you to a policy on their website that basically says, "Hey, here's examples of what you might have done." Or it might be something completely different, just basically a bunch of vague information. And your account, there's no warning period. Your account is done. It is suspended. No ads can run, and you're dead in the water. And the only way to fix that is to appeal to Google and try to get them to reverse their decision. And so, generally, what we're doing with clients, or businesses who hire us for help with this is, all right, let's see what may have went wrong. We're going to audit the ad account, audit the website, and say, are there obvious policies that you are violating? It could be something as simple as you've got a redirect in your URL, and Google doesn't allow that. You can get suspended for circumventing systems if you have that. It's not malicious, necessarily. It can be malicious, but it's not malicious. The businesses who hire us, but they just don't know. Okay, I can't have this. Or it could be they're missing policy pages on their website that they need to have. Or it could be they're using terminology on the website that's not precise about what type of business they are, and so they're flagging like keywords that Google's looking for to think that they're in a different industry than they are, maybe in a banned industry that Google doesn't allow to advertise, so forth and so on. All sorts of things it can be. And so it's about finding those things, because Google, again, doesn't tell you what they are,
Mhm.
and then fixing those things, fixing everything that could be a problem, and then appealing to Google. And appealing to Google in a strategic way too. So what a lot of advertisers will do when they have that panic moment is they'll click the button that says appeal, and they'll be like, "Hey, Google, like you said, mea culpa. Sorry, what did I do wrong? Tell me what I did wrong. I'll fix it." And they've now wasted an appeal opportunity, because Google's never going to tell them what they did specifically wrong. They're just going to say, "Hey, you haven't fixed the problem. You're rejected." And now you've used up kind of your first appeal, your first shot at getting things resolved. And then often they'll come to us, or sometimes after the second or third or fourth appeal, and we're like, "Hey, I thought this was going to be easy. It's not. What on earth do we do?" And so we appeal to Google in a way that we know Google likes seeing information, being very clear about what we fixed, what may have gone wrong, apologizing for any mistakes, explaining how things will be different moving forward, providing documentation to Google of changes that have made and stuff like that, and then working through Google's system to try to get the judge's gavel to come down and get them out of jail.
By the way, you described pretty much exactly what I did, right? Going and saying, "Please tell me what I did wrong," and probably there's some human being somewhere on the other side of the globe who's reading that, and they have a script to follow, and whatever I asked was not part of the script, and therefore I got dinged again.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I'm not in the business of advertising myself, so I don't rely on it the way that many businesses do.
Yeah.
You happen to run a business that is specializing in the inner workings of these platforms, and part one of the things that I've encountered, I see this certainly more on the Meta platforms than on Google, but it happens on Google as well, is n- uh, difficulty in how you even communicate with them, right?
Yeah.
When is sometimes there's a button, sometimes there's not. You need to know the process of communication. You need to know how to navigate. And then, as you described, you have to understand what are the things they're looking for, the things they need to hear, navigating their system or the way they prioritize the way that they deal with things.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about like what it takes to get that relationship with. We'll keep going with Google since that's the one we've been using as an example.
Mhm.
Um, I kind of thought, gee, a big advertising spend that affords you the relationship, and therefore, but as you said a few minutes ago, spending millions of dollars doesn't necessarily give you the opportunity to have um, a phone you can pick up and call your rep and say, hey, can you help me out here?
Exactly. Yeah, so a lot of it comes down to how Google, and Meta is fairly similar, but I'll focus on Google here, how they've structured things internally. So, you can, generally speaking, you can get to a place often as an advertiser where you have some kind of a rep at Google. If you're spending a lot of money, you'll get maybe a better rep, hopefully. If you're an agency, you'll have agency level team members, etc. But just because you have that person that you can call or email doesn't mean they can do anything internally, because Google has these firewalls between their trust and safety team, who are the people who actually decide whether or not accounts get unsuspended, and their sales team, which are the team that works with advertisers. So we had this all the time. I'll have clients like, hey, I've got my Google rep and I've asked him what's going on, how to fix it, and he's not helping. And there's just frankly not a lot that they can do internally, because Google just has these firewalls in place. And so a lot of what Stub Group brings to the table is it's not the personal relationship with Google. I mean, we have that, but it's not like I call somebody at Google and say, "Hey, what's going on with X, Y, and Z account? Fix it." It's we've seen so many suspensions and figured out by trial and error over time what works and what doesn't work, that we frankly we know a lot more about Google's policies than Googlers do. I was on a call with our Google team the other week, and one of our team members there is like, "Hey, I was just watching your videos about circumventing systems, and I learned some new stuff I didn't know was a thing. That's really interesting." That's just because we have a team that's dedicated to this, and that just has that pattern recognition over time.
It's kind of funny when you can teach folks at Google a little bit more about their own business, and I've heard that before, right? I've heard SEO folks saying the same sort of stuff.
Totally.
You gave some sort of general examples a few minutes ago about the things that get you into trouble, and I wonder if you can talk about like what are the most common things you encounter where when you do that assessment or that audit. What are you identifying most commonly? What are the easy fixes? What are the more difficult fixes as well?
Yeah. So one of the most common suspension reasons Google gives out is suspicious payments activity. And a lot of advertisers get really confused by this, because they'll have created a new ad account, have not spent any money, have not paid any money at Google, and they'll get flagged by this. They're like, how is this suspicious? I haven't even paid money to them yet. And really what this means is generally what it means is Google thinks that there's something suspicious with either the payment method you're using, or there could be multiple accounts out there, different things. So some of those common things I see there are, let's say you have multiple ad accounts with the same payment method. that can look suspicious to Google. It's not technically against any of Google's policies. You're allowed to have multiple accounts with the same payment method, but a lot of bad actors do that. And so Google's algorithms often flag that as being a problem. Other problems could be just simply entering information incorrectly into your account when you set things up. So, billing address that mismatches with your credit card, or typos, things like that. It can seem really simple, but stuff like that can cause suspensions. It can also be type of credit card you're using. So if you're using a virtual credit card, Google often doesn't like that. I've seen that lead to suspensions, stuff like that. Another common one would be unacceptable business practices, which basically means Google thinks that there's something fishy about your business or business model. So often we'll see this happen to franchises, where the franchise, they might have their own website, but they've got the name of the franchisor and their domain is part of the domain. They've got their logo, and Google looks at that and says, "Oh, you're copying this other person. You're phishing or scamming."
Mhm.
And you have to prove, "No, we're a franchisee. Here's our license. This is legit," and go through that process.
So, but that's an example of something that is legitimate. What could
Yeah,
you just for our listeners
yeah.
highlight the things that are just totally forbidden? Like, what are the
Oh, totally.
industries? What are the types of things that like cannabis, for example, or alcohol or whatever else is not allowed?
Absolutely. Yep. So you've got industries that Google just won't let you advertise in. So a good example would be like third-party tech support. So if you want to provide just tech support over the internet to a consumer, not allowed to do that because there was so much fraud in that space that Google, they made a ton of money in it, but they finally said it's not worth the headache and lawsuits and whatnot. So they just shut it down. You've got definitely very restricted areas, like you mentioned, cannabis, anything healthcare related. There are a lot of restrictions. Often you have to have certifications or go through a process with Google to get certified if you're selling, prescription pharmaceuticals or things like that. There's a whole list of products that Google has that you just can't advertise. They had this big list of, you can't, steroids and different things that they just won't let you advertise. Fun story though, it's not a comprehensive list. So sometimes, you'd be like, "Hey, why can't we advertise this?" And like, "Oh, well, it's not on the list that we publish, but yeah, you can advertise that." So that can be an interesting conversation as well.
I imagine in health related things and probably other regulated industries, claims around a certain thing might also get you in trouble.
Absolutely. You're 100% right. Yeah. And this is where you have to be really careful what you claim about your products. It can be as simple as saying, this will cause weight loss versus this may cause weight loss. One word, really big difference. One is a claim that Google doesn't believe you can support, and they don't want to get sued by someone who clicked through an ad and said, "You told me I will lose weight and I didn't, and this is a problem." Whereas if you say, "Hey, this may cause," have a disclaimer, individual results may vary, et cetera, et cetera. It still can be challenging because Google's still very sensitive about those things, but you can get to a place where you are compliant with Google and not making claims, just
Yep.
making statements that may be possible or may be true.
Okay. I've taken you off track a couple of times there, but you were going through some of the other sort of most common things. And was there anything else that we should mention before we move on?
In the e-commerce space, that's one of the most common things is just not having appropriate policy pages on your website. So things like your return policy, your refund policy, your shipping policy. These are things that Google requires that people know what they're getting into when they purchase from you. And sometimes just not having those policy pages on your website can result in a suspension.
I've had ads rejected when there wasn't, privacy policy and terms and conditions in the
Mhm.
footer of a page that we're sending the traffic to, and so that's
Yeah.
like one of the things I'm always looking for. And surprisingly, there's many businesses that don't have those pages.
And Google's incredibly inconsistent too, which is always fun when, we'll be working with a business and they're like, "Well, none of our competitors have this and they're all advertising." And we have to say, "I get it. It
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. But the only consistent thing about Google is their inconsistency. For whatever reason, they flagged you and now you are being held to a higher standard than your competitors. And as much as I hate that, the only thing you can do is try to abide by that standard because you're not going to win an argument with Google."
Yeah. We have a good number of marketing service providers who listen, and one of the things that on this topic I've encountered in the past is marketers who get banned because they are managing a client's, ad account. This happens, I think, a lot more on Meta than I've heard on Google, but one of their clients accounts does something wrong, and therefore the management of everything in the business manager is taken away from that agency. Tell me a little
Right.
bit about what you know in that area.
Yeah, there's definitely dangers there. The best way to mitigate those, and you're never always going to be perfectly safe, but the best way to mitigate those is tactically how you access your clients' accounts. So for Google Ads, for example, rather than being added as a user, your email address being added as a user to clients' ad accounts, it's better to create what they call a Google Ads Manager account, where you can then send invitations to your clients' accounts. And that helps because Google better understands, oh yeah, agencies use manager accounts. You're necessarily, the user in the account. You're making changes. You had the same level of access, but you're not necessarily going to be held as liable for suspensions as the list of users whose email addresses are on the ad account.
Mhm.
Kind of same thing for Meta. As far as you want to use a business manager, use that to access client accounts. Again, there can still be problems. There's no, fail safe, but that can help mitigate that problem.
So I know this is an area of specialty for Stub Group, and to a certain extent, it's probably something that a lot of people come to you for. But tell me a little bit more about sort of beyond this area, the things that you tend to work on, and the types of clients you tend to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is just a segment of what we do, the policy side of things, kind of an interesting niche we've gotten into over the years. But outside of that, we do what I'd call more traditional paid advertising agency. So we work
Mhm.
with all kinds of different clients, different businesses, creating and managing their Google advertising campaigns, meta ads, etc., and obviously keeping them compliant along with that. But looking to meet whatever those goals are: target return on ad spend, cost per lead, many different business models we work with, but just trying to run profitable campaigns for them.
When did you get into this part of the marketing world, and what brought you to it?
Yeah, it's over a decade at this point, coming up, I think 11, 12 years at this point. So the Stub Group was started by two guys. One of those is my brother, so that's how
Mhm.
I got into things way back in the day. And they brought me on basically as employee number one back in the day, and said, "Hey, we all came from different types of marketing backgrounds, email marketing, traditional different stuff." Said, "Hey, there is this massive opportunity in the digital advertising space." It wasn't new then. Obviously, there was a lot of digital advertising going on, but we are still very much in a situation where tons of people were making that switch from traditional advertising to digital, and they needed help. They needed someone to steward that ad spend and figure out how to navigate this world of Google and Facebook and so forth. And so we saw that as a need and an opportunity, and build our agency around providing that as a service, specifically on the paid search and paid social side of things. And it's really grew that over time, bootstrapped, figured things out ourselves, figured out how to run our own campaigns, how to do it well for clients, how to bring on additional team members with good skills, and then build our client base as well over time.
So you talked a little bit about sort of the folks who came together with different backgrounds within Stub Group, and you also talked about the transition from more traditional, maybe offline areas of marketing. I'm curious at this point in your business how much you deal with those other areas, interact with the business in terms of like, okay, what happens after the click, or those types of things.
Fantastic question. A lot of that comes down to how open our clients are with us. So our ideal client relationship is that we can understand as much about their business as possible. Obviously, we have to understand what we're in control of, the advertising campaign side of things, where we're sending traffic to, etc. But we also want to understand what other advertising are they doing that's going to impact things. Are they running radio ads, TV ads, affiliate marketing, whatever? We want to understand the whole scope of things. And then, like you said, also what happens after the lead comes in or after the order comes in. What are they doing to increase the lifetime value of their customers? What are they doing to close sales so that the leads we're sending are actually turning into dollars in the door for them? And often it ends up in somewhat of a consultative relationship
Mhm.
where, hey, we're not necessarily we're not pretending to be the experts at sales or the experts at email marketing or whatever, but we are providing a lot of ideas and input into things, because all of that does directly translate back into whether or not our advertising campaigns are going to be successful and meet the goals the clients have set for us.
When you learn about other things that they're doing, I guess the question that I really want to ask is more about, is there collaboration or cooperation with the larger picture? And as you know, and as our regular listeners know, I'm all about strategic approach to, growing a business. And often what we see with many businesses, and this is a warning to businesses more than to you, is that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, and as a result, both have are set up for failure because they are not as well coordinated as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a good example of this would be a situation we've had recently where we've been helping a client. Their advertising campaigns not performing as we want, not performing up to expectation, and we're working with them trying to figure out what's going on, and took a step back and said, okay, what's their market fit? And we're looking at their market fit, and we're looking at their products, their prices for their products relative to other products, and also digging in, okay, what are their shipping costs or handling costs? And we realize, hey, you guys are significantly more expensive than the market, and you have these hidden fees. So when someone adds the product to the cart, then they get to the cart, you're adding on another $150 shipping and handling fee on top of that. And then they calculate their shipping fees on top of that, and they're more expensive to your competitors. And so we had the situation where lots and lots of people were adding products to their cart, but then they weren't actually checking out, because once they got the full cost of the product, it was way more expensive than competitors. And that's not something our advertising campaign can fix. That's a product market price point thing. And so we were able to pull together the numbers, show them, look, these are the benchmark rates at which your people adding to cart should be purchasing. You are exponentially lower than that. Here's the competitors who have a 50% cheaper price, and so they've adjusted their fees, adjusted their price points, and we're seeing way better results, not surprisingly, because they're from a big picture perspective, they now fit better with where the market expectation is.
Yeah. By the way, that solid work on your part, because that's not a typical thing that you would hear from an agency, is like digging into where's the problem. Most agencies tend to be focused in the area of their expertise that they don't look beyond it. So your clients should be proud that they have you as their agency.
Thanks.
Um, uh, I guess I want to talk a little bit about uh, the compliance with Google stuff, because I know that you have a gift for folks who are listening, and you have some advice on sort of how to best stay compliant. Who is this for mostly? Is this for somebody who's already advertising, somebody who is thinking about advertising, wants to get off on the right foot? I mean, where do we need to even be paying attention?
Anybody who's going to have an ad account should be aware of these things, Google ad accounts. So if you're brand new setting things up, really important you understand policies, compliance. If you're running right now, you've been running for 5 years, it doesn't matter. You need to know these things, because any day Google can flip something. Google's algorithm can, you've had the same ad running for 2 years, no problems. 2 years and one day, boom, it's down.
Mhm.
So you've got to be aware of these things. And I think the content you're talking about there, we have a free guide to Google compliance on our website. Go to
Yep.
stubgroup.com/free, download it from there. It has a lot of helpful ideas that we've gleaned over the years, a lot of things to be aware of. It can't be a comprehensive guide, because there's just way too much. We could write books and books and books, and still there's nuances, but it covers some of the most important and most common problems that you want to be aware of, and make sure do not exist in your own accounts.
And at least the way that I'm reading what you have here on that page, it's not just risking the loss of an advertising account. There's also just a financial cost potentially for doing things wrong. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, any day, obviously, your ads are down, you are losing incredible, potential there. We'll often have this conversation with clients, which is, all right, how much are you bringing in each day from your advertising? All right, that means each day that you're down, that's how much money you're losing. So even though you're not spending money those days, the opportunity cost is massive. And then there's also, sometimes kind of a middle of the road. So maybe Google is not completely suspending your account,
Mhm.
but they have a couple other things that they can throw at you as well. Limited ad serving is one where your account is not completely suspended, but
Mm.
Google basically says, "Hey, we're not sure about you, so we're going to limit your ads. You're not going to get as many impressions as you could." And you're like, okay, cool. So, you can try to appeal that and try and give Google more information, which generally speaking, you should go through that process. But there's a couple of different layers of Google trying to cover their rear and make your life more interesting.
Fascinating. I think you've just answered some questions about why a campaign that we were running didn't do as well as we thought it did. It. So, well, this is brilliant. I really appreciate it. And for folks who are interested in this guide, which is you're calling it "What You Need to Know to Stay Compliant with Google Ads," it can be found at stubgroup.com/free. That's stubgroup.com/free. John Horn, thank you so very much. This has been a fascinating conversation.
David, thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Indeed. Folks, you've been listening to More Perfect Marketing. If you know somebody who could benefit from listening to this conversation, and I'm pretty sure you do, please send them our way. Until next time, take care.